Resuming. Jesus stares at the place. He then turns round, leans back once again against the wall, as he had done before, and looks at a hillock which is in front of the building. A hillock crowded with houses at its base, while the rest of it is bare. I see that a street ends over there in an arch, beyond which there is nothing but a road paved with square stones, which are loose and uneven. They are not too large, not like the stones of the Roman consular roads. They rather resemble the classic stones of the old pavements in Viareggio. I do not know whether there are any still left, but they are not joined together. A really rough road. Jesus' face becomes so serious that I look at the hillock, endeavouring to find the cause of his sadness, but I do not see anything special. It is a bare hillock, and nothing else. Instead, I lose Jesus, because when I turn round, he is no longer there. And I fall asleep with that vision. Well, I imagine, just to interrupt here, that you're thinking what I'm thinking, that Jesus is looking at Calvary. And of course he knows, as a boy, what will be his fate 20 years hence. Maria Valtorta, I don't think, has yet had the vision of Calvary, the passion of our Lord, and so she's not sure what she's looking at. Resuming anyway. When I awake from its memory in my heart, after I've recovered some of my strength and my mind is at peace, because they're all asleep, I find myself in a place which I've never seen before. There are yards and fountains and porches and houses, or rather pavilions, because they look more like pavilions than houses. There is a large crowd of people dressed in the ancient style of the Jews, and there is a lot of bawling. When I look round, I realise that I'm inside the large building which Jesus was looking at, because I see the embattled wall surrounding it, the tower watching over it, and the imposing building that rises in the centre, and round which there are beautiful and large porches where many people are intent on activities. I understand that I'm in the enclosure of the temple in Jerusalem. I see Pharisees in long flowing dresses, priests dressed in linen and wearing precious plates at the top of their chests and on their foreheads, and with other sparkling points here and there on their varied robes, which are very wide and white, tied to their waists by precious belts. There are also others with fewer decorations, but they must still belong to the sacerdotal caste and are surrounded by younger disciples. I realise that they are the doctors of the law. Among all these people I'm lost, because I do not know why or what I'm doing there. I go near a group of doctors, where they have just started a theological dispute. Many people do the same. Amongst the doctors, there is a group headed by one whose name is Gamaliel, and by another old and almost blind man who is supporting Gamaliel in the dispute. This man, whose name I hear, is Hillel. I'm writing it with an H, because I hear an aspiration at the beginning of the name. Seems to be a teacher or relative of Gamaliel, because the latter treats him with familiarity and respect at the same time. Gamaliel's group is more broad-minded, whereas another group, and it is more numerous, is led by one whose name is Shammai, and is noticeable for its conservative, resentful intolerance, which the Gospel has clarified so well. Gamaliel, surrounded by a compact group of disciples, is speaking of the coming of the Messiah and founding his observations on Daniel's prophecy. He states that the Messiah must have already been born, because the 70 prophesied weeks from the time the decree of the reconstruction of the temple was issued, expired some 10 years before. Shammai opposes him, stating that if it is true that the temple has been rebuilt, it is also true that the slavery of Israel has increased, and the peace, which he whom the prophets called Prince of Peace was to bring, is quite far from being in the world, and in particular is far from Jerusalem. The town is in fact oppressed by an enemy who is so bold as to exert his domination inside the enclosure of the temple, dominated by the Antonia Tower, full of Roman legionaries, ready to put down with their swords any riot which may break out for the independence of the country. The dispute, full of captious objections, is dragged on endlessly. All the doctors show off their learning, not so much to beat their opponents, as to display themselves to the admiration of the listeners. Their aims are quite obvious.